Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the second episode of our For the Love of Emails Thursdays. This is going to be a weekly webinar sharing our knowledge about email marketing, email deliverability strategies, um, you know, um, and anything and everything that's happening around email world, new innovations that you want to learn. So this is where we share. This is your destination for you to join in every week. To get your weekly dosage of email marketing. I am Chaitanya. I head global. I head email business for Netcore globally. You can find me at my Twitter handle CJ. And without further delay, we'll get into our topic today, which is reactivation is better than reacquisition. And I'm sure most of the e-commerce brands today have some or the other way of doing, having a reactivation program or win back program, to get the lost customers back into the system. Today, we are going to go over a bit deeper to understand, understand some trends that we've been seeing, and and best practices on how to build the email reactivation program better. So that's what we'll be mostly covering on. Why reactivation, and how is it better than reacquisition, right? So reactivation, for any e-commerce brand, and then this is a common understanding, right? So chances of selling to a new customer is about 5 to 20%, right? At the same time, chances of selling to an existing customer is about 60 to 70%, right? So if you have an existing active customer, the chances of selling your product to that customer is about 60 to 70%. But when it comes to a lost customer, which is where we are going to spend more time today, chances of selling to a lost customer is about 20 to 40%, right? So, so in a way, if you see, selling to a lost customer is easier than selling it to a new customer, right? So because the customer already knows about your brand, he has some experience with you as a brand. He knows what you're offering, and hence the chances of selling to a lost customer are better. And what we see in the rush to acquire new customers, most of the e-commerce brands, what we see is that, of course, the acquisition costs for a new customer are very high, right? Acquisition cost for any new customer, acquisition cost is very high, and customers who fall off retention bucket, usually they get reacquired via Google, Facebook, and other expensive channels that we see. They usually get reacquired. So the moment we are talking about reacquiring, so the acquisition cost is about 6 to 7 times higher than retention cost. So brands are shelling off a large amount of sum to reacquire the same customers again and again, right? What we call is a doom loop. That cycle goes on and on and on. That's what we are trying to break. That's what we are trying to break with reactivation. And how do we get the customers, identify the customers, and how do we get them back into get them back into the system? There are 4 questions to answer when we talk about any reactivation program, right? The first is which customers. Now, which customers are turning inactive? How do we? When are they turning inactive? Which customers? How do we identify them? And then understanding when are they turning inactive, and why are they turning inactive? Understanding that as a reason is also extremely important. And how do we re-engage? These are the 4 big questions that we need to understand before starting off with any reactivation program. Usually brands have a very broader, stroke that we have seen, at least with some of the brands that we work, they have a very broad stroke in terms of when it comes to identifying which customers are turning inactive, right? But what we see is, not all customers are equal, right? 80-20 rule applies in most online settings, and including e-commerce and many other verticals too, right? So a large portion of revenues come from a small portion of customers. And if we break down the range of customer probability and profitability, right? So there, the first is a long tail, which usually you spend a lot to acquire the customers, but they don't turn into profitable customers. Then you have moderately unprofitable customers, and then moderately profitable, which are maybe these are the guys who usually come during the sales season and then drop off the grid right after the sales season. And then you have the highly profitable customers who are loyal to you, who engage with you, who transact with you more and more, right? They will need differential treatment. They will need differential treatment in retention and reactivation. These are your repeat customers. And losing any customer from this bucket can be devastating. Like you cannot afford to lose customers from this bucket. You can keep on adding to it, so you can define ways to get these customers from these buckets, the other three buckets, into highly profitable, but you cannot afford to lose these customers from the highly profitable bucket. But when it comes to e-commerce, again, right? So there is no contractual binding. So there is no subscription. There's no there's no guarantee that a customer who's done a transaction will come back again. And there are models to identify in this kind of non-contractual setting. There are existing models to identify when a customer is going to, or which customers are going to go inactive, right? So the RFM, soft churn, hidden macro, there are a bunch of machine learning models out there. And not every time you need a complex model again, right? Even if even if you're not exposed to any complex machine learning model to give you this data, just look at, if a customer has done more than 2 transactions, the frequency of the transaction. Like, for example, if I were to be a grocery store, a growth marketer or a CRM head, right? The expectation is that the user transacts every month, right, to buy monthly groceries. Let's say if the user misses if a user misses out on a on one calendar month, then I know that I need to flag that user. There's something wrong, and I might want to flag that user. If it continues for 2 months, then I'm sure that the customer is sort of dropping off, right? So a simple calculation like that can also give a view to when the customer is going to drop off the grid. If the customer is the first time transactor, you typically have an average frequency per transaction for your other customers, and then you can align it and see where this customer when this customer is expected to do the next transaction. But what is more important is to identify customer level probable inactive date on a calendar, right? Like if a customer does not do transaction in next 15 days, I would tag him as inactive. So at least that kind of understanding is something that we need to get per customer level. So that's what we are coming to, right? This is extremely important to get started, right? Identifying the right set of customers who are going to turn inactive. Right. And then there is timing of reactivation. When should we start targeting, right? Longer the inactivity, harder to get a customer back. Let's say if a customer has done a transaction with you maybe a year ago, if you're talking to him right now, then it's all the way, you're reintroducing your brand, and then you have to do a lot of activity. But then if it's still fresh, then it is the brand recall is there, and then it is easy to get such customers back into the group, right? And so the recommended approach is to start the reactivation program as soon as the customer hits the threshold date of no transaction, right? And more than 90% of the brands use email as a strong channel for running reactivation programs. And the main reason for that is email is one channel that gives you rich connectivity to the end user than any other channel out there. For example, if you are an app first company or even an e-commerce website, right? The moment user goes off your property, then if the user uninstalls your app, or let's say if your user maybe goes away from your property, then there's no way for you to reach out. Maybe there can be SMS, but SMS is still a text heavy channel and expensive. But email becomes that one channel which gives rich connectivity to the user and highly profitable too. So most of the reactivation programs choose, email. Most of the brands choose email as an obvious channel out there, right? Uh, and the next uh, uh, point is to understand why the user has turned inactive. Now, so in one of the surveys that American Express has conducted, right? So 33%. So most of the customers have, 33% customers turn inactive after one bad experience with the brand. Just one bad experience and you lost the customer, right? It could be experience, it could be personal reasons, change in lifestyle, customer moving out of town, could be anything, right? Or even a simply better offer by a competitive brand, right? Could be any reason, but it is important to understand why the customer has turned inactive. But if you have to understand why the customer is behaving in such a way, it is important to capture those signals early in the system, right? When as soon as the user has placed an order, as soon as the delivery has done, or at periodic stages, it is important to collect feedback about each and every transaction that you do and what is the overall customer feedback. The moment there's a negative feedback, then you need to understand that there's a threat to this customer, and then how do you get it back? How do you get him back into the group? And the other piece that is sort of coming up recently for the last maybe in last 1.5 year, there is an increasing trend of brands using email as a tool to do preference management, right? So traditionally there have been preference centers on many websites, or you can have websites or apps will usually have a lot of preference centers associated, which give where you can set frequency of communications, what you want to see, what you don't want to see, what your likes, dislikes, and everything. Most of the brands have it, but the fill rate is very low. You as an end user, I can't remember when I would have gone to a preference center and gave my preferences. The usual access to preference center is usually to go and unsubscribe, right? But when I use when done right with email and with latest technologies like AMP and which makes more, preference collection more interactive, right? It's not just click on button and then go on to website and do something, but preferences can be collected right within the email. A form can be filled right within the email, right? All of those new age interactions are covering preference management via email strongly, and the fill rates are also extremely high, right? So these are the kind of signals that you'll have to collect right from the beginning to understand why the user is turning inactive. Like the moment the user hits the threshold, you have a history, right? Having that history is very important. And the next important piece is to understand what message to reactivate. And the moment we talk about a reactivation program or a win back program, right, the usual approach is to give a better offer, to give a better deal, to give a better discount. If my usual discount on my website is about 15-20%, maybe I'll give it 30% to see if the customer comes back. That's the usual approach that most of the brands adopt to get the customers back into the group. But usually that might or might not work. It could be a hit and miss. Meaning, in some settings, this can definitely work and give better results. But there are definitely equal number of examples on the other side where just throwing in better offer might not yield any great result, right? And what we have also seen is that reactivation messages when not done right, like sending a miscue message when when user is not even not expecting it, right? If it's not done right, then it can invoke a latent intent to churn out, right? Um, by default, user might not have that intent, but the moment he sees your message, well, we miss you, it in fact invokes that intent. And there have been plenty of research that has been done on this behavioral aspect of end users, that uh, reactivation messages should be done right. Otherwise, I mean, it can cause much damage uh, than it can do, right? Um, but when it comes to the messaging itself, when it comes to the messaging itself, it's not just about sending a we miss you message or sending a best offer, right? It is to generate the engagement first. You have to connect to the user better, right? Um, and what we have seen is that sending different kinds of messaging. We experimented with different types of messages that we can probably send when it comes to activating the user, right? In some cases, we tried with simply educational, moved completely away from offer centric messages, but sent only the educational, info centric, informational centric, or entertaining emails to gather better response, and that worked with a good number of with few brands that we worked with. And in some other cases, we just gamified the overall experience. Let's say you answer a survey to get a coupon, and all the action within the email with AMP, right? To answer a survey and then get a coupon. Some of these messages, some of these kind of interactive messages with differential, even the messaging keeping it differently. What we've seen is that users interact with these messages better, right? So the moment there is a signal that the user is turning inactive, you know sending better engaging messages to the users helps them, bring them back into the group, right? One recent approach that we have also taken is to see if we can reward users based on email engagement. Like, if you have a loyalty program, then for every email engagement you can probably contribute to few maybe few loyalty points for the user. Now this can be a hack in itself. But it definitely helps in some cases where users want to build loyalty points. Then this is one way to add up to the loyalty points, right? um, But the larger message here is that it is engagement first, um, then comes reactivation. So build the engagement first, get the user engaged with you as a brand, and then slowly convert into reactivation, right? So that's how the strategy has to be. Maybe just throwing an offer might not work, as I said. So 4 big takeaways for today is to identify customer level inactivity date, and bucket them based on customer type too, right? So that's the first message: identifying the right kind of customers who are customers and when they are getting inactive. Reactivation program should kick in right after the user crosses a threshold. Do not delay. As soon as the user crosses a threshold, the reactivation program should kick in. The more delay, it is harder to get the user back. Implementing preference management and feedback programs to know updated preferences of the customers, feedback about their recent experience. All of those are extremely crucial to have those signals, and each of the signal can help you make a better decision, right? Uh, uh, and last, on the messaging piece, is to try and engage better with the customers. Reactivation comes next. So in this time frame, don't just throw offers. Don't just throw offers to users, but have a healthy mix of engaging emails to them, right? So once the engagement is built, reactivation follows naturally, right? So yeah, so these are the 4 big takeaways uh, from today's session. I think I'm at the end of my uh, tech. You have any? I'm open for any questions now.
So, Chetu, we have one question which
Okay.
by an attendee. So it says
Mhm.
preference management usually yields low responses. How do we address it?
Okay, so preference management, as I said, if you do it on a website or an app, yes, it definitely yields very few responses. Nobody wants to give away their preferences just like that, right? There's a form and somebody, if you're expecting the user to come to a website and fill the preferences, no, that's not going to happen. But when you sort of gamify it, right? When you sort of gamify it within the email, the responses can be much better. Like for example, there's a brand called Lenskart in India, right? Let's say I was browsing recently to buy specs, right? Uh, I had to change my frame, and then I was searching. Now, uh, I gave my email address, I signed up, I browsed, but last moment I did not choose to make a transaction for whatever reason, and I sort of dropped off. But then if the uh, you know brand could send preferences in a way that there are like four different kinds of frames. Which one suits you better? There could be aviator, there could be frameless, and then there could be some other, right? Some other frames, which suits you better. And let's say and the framing of the email could be that which suits you better, and then by answering this you will get about, let's say, 40% discount on your next purchase or whatever that offer is. But making the user participating in such kind of quizzes and surveys will definitely give better responses. uh, it's sort of a gamification. I answer the quiz to get a coupon code. But the moment I give, let's say, suppose that I tap on aviator within the email, right? That gives a signal to brand saying that this person likes aviator glasses. Again, it's part of my personal preferences, right? And the next messages that come to me can be specific to aviator glasses, right? So that's how you have to build the preference management. Plain dry messaging asking for preferences might not help, but gamify it, you'll definitely get better responses. So that's the short answer.
So, Chaitanya, we have another question, a few questions in the chat box as well. Uh,
Okay.
so we'll just take one by one. So Alma
Yeah.
Syed asks,
I can't see chat box, and you'll have to help me with that.
okay, so I'll just read it out for you. Uh,
Yeah. Hold on.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I got it. I got it.
okay.
Now, reactivation programs, how do you measure results? Um, okay, this one could be, tricky, and then maybe depends on different types of brands. But generally, what usually happens is what brands measure is um, how many of users who have crossed the threshold of inactivity have done a transaction again. So that's one measure. And a further advanced measurement metric is second lifetime value. Usually brands, the e-commerce brands look at customer lifetime value as one metric, the first customer lifetime value. After, if the customer has done a transaction, it's simply the number of customers have done a transaction after crossing that threshold of lifetime, inactivity date that you put down, right? So that will be the number of customers who would have won back, and the time that they spend with you is the second lifetime value. These could be two measures to measure the effectiveness, overall effectiveness of the activation programs.
Yeah, so we have other questions as well.
Okay.
Uh, so would you be able to see the first question? What if it is a B2B SaaS product whose lifecycle journey itself is too long, or one-time purchase in both the scenarios?
No, I did not understand. What is one? So I understand the B2B part of it. Usually the purchase cycles are long. But the second part of it, like the customer is expected to do only one-time transaction.
So it's not clear here as well. Uh,
Okay, if the customer is
ye-
expected to do only one-time transaction, then the question of reactivation might not come unless you see that the customer has not done a transaction and just dropped off the kit. He would have engaged with you and then dropped off the kit. Maybe that if that is the question, uh, then usually you know in B2B case, right? In B2B case, usually every customer is bombarded with a lot of similar kind of emails, right? Unless your mail stands out in their mailbox and gives specific value, I don't think they would be engaging. So maybe making it more targeted, more um, in B2B you can actually do one-to-one targeting, literal one-to-one targeting. In B2C case it might still be hard, but B2B you can do that, right? So understanding the persona better and targeting the uh, the person on the other side based on their persona and their interests could definitely help.
so we have another question from Jason Lee. It says,
Mhm.
if I'm just starting looking into churn, what is a good model to begin with as a starting point?
Okay, if you're just starting, then maybe now I don't know about the entire user base, but usually the RFM is the easiest to understand and then get started easily. And there are standard models out there, right? Like that can be easiest way to start.
And we have another question from Hannah Tillotson. So it says, if
Sure.
you are a service-based company, how would you recommend we create a loyalty scheme?
If you're a service-based company, no, if you're a service-based company, you might not have a direct loyalty. If I understand it right, you might not have a direct loyalty program, but you can probably partner with a neutral loyalty program and run it. I mean, that can be one way of doing it. I can think of, but I might want to understand the case better to help answer the question.
Okay, so we have another question from Anusha Nambiar. So it says, does reaching out to inactive users hurt inboxing? I think you've answered it, right?
No, no. Okay. So see, if you just reach out to all inactive user base in one go, it definitely hurts deliverability. That's not the idea, right? So the whole point was to identify bucket of users when they are turning inactive at like by day, not you know group them into one bucket and send large amount of emails. Let's say you cannot just do maybe a million users who are inactive. Here is a mail, and then I'm sending it to you. No, that's not how any reactivation program works. You have to break it down. Um, uh, you need to have a healthy like 80% of mailing that is happening on your regular active user base, and maybe 20% is what you can uh, what probably include for inactive. You can probably set aside for inactive users. Again, this is not a hard rule. Every brand has different levels of engagement. It could be 90-10 for few brands. It could be 70-30 for few brands. It could be, but yeah, usually there needs to be a mix with active mailing and then have inactive as part of the strategy. It needs to flow in. You cannot just group a large portion of inactive and then start sending emails.
Yes. So, Chetan, we are out of questions now, and I think we should wrap up the session. It's already 6:30.
Yep, I think we are at the end of today's session. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can reach out to me on email anywhere. We can definitely I'll definitely answer them. The next episode, with that, we have next episode coming up with our own Tejas Pitkar. He's been our senior product evangelist. He's an awesome guy, and he's going to talk about drip campaigns and our value investing. You know, this is going to be an awesome episode too. Happening on 11th November at 6 p.m. Hoping that you all will join for the next episode. I'm going to join in. I hope you all are joining in. Yeah, I think thank you all for joining today. We'll see you next week.